coming today. I'm Malachi. I'm the Director of Education here at Sovereign. And typically I probably wouldn't be in here. I have kids right now in the classroom, so I was asked if I could present someone I think canceled. So here I am. I'm going to do my best. I decided against a fancy presentation because this is a little more my style, a little more fluid this way. So today's topic, you guys probably read on the little sheet, is about bullying. And there was kind of a misprint on the sheet that called the person involved in that situation a victim. And part of what I would do today is talk about how it's probably not a good term to use. And we also don't call the kids who are doing that behavior bullies. We call them people who bully. So today's topic will kind of run the gamut between people who are bullied and people who bully, because I believe there is a direct connection to mental health issues. So what makes me qualified to talk about bullying? I do not have a degree in bullying. I have not gone to bully school. But over the course of my lifetime, I have been both a person who bullies and a person who has been bullied. I feel that initially qualifies me to talk about this. The internet is the rest of what qualifies me to talk about it because I found a lot of information. So I was a statistic at age 8, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, and I was also a statistic at age 15, right around there. And probably for several years after that, due to certain things in my life. However, we'll talk more about that later. So in 2014, the Center for Disease Control and the Department of Education got together and they created an actual definition of what bullying is. So you guys probably have your own ideas of, like, can someone tell me what they think bullying is? Anyone in those areas? You don't have to raise your hand even.
Picking on someone.
Okay, picking on someone, good.
Making somebody feel scared.
Making someone scared, good.
Shaming.
Those are all great and part of the actual definition. So the actual definition that they came up with was unwanted aggressive behavior, observed or perceived power imbalance, and repetition of behaviors or the high likelihood of repetition. So those were the core elements in the definition. It also talked about there are 2 modes of bullying and 4 types of bullying that are actually recognized kind of internationally. The 2 modes of bullying, can anyone think of what they are? It's super simple, don't overthink it.
Physical, emotional.
Those are types.
In person.
Very good.
And ego not.
Yes, direct and indirect. Those are the 2 actual types or modes of bullying. So direct bullying, we'll talk about a little bit later, is that you're actually confronting the person. And indirect would be via either other people or other means and not face-to-face. So direct bullying occurs in the presence, indirect bullying not directly communicated to the intended target.
So is that like internet, things like that?
Yes, those fall under that category, yes. I should also say, I might not be able to answer all of your questions because I do not have statistics and facts memorized, but I will do my best. So the 4 types of bullying that we talked about, so physical, verbal, relational, and damage of property. So the first one that we will discuss will be physical. Physical harm to the intended target is the only thing really in that category. The harm can range from a bruise or a red mark to a physical injury or death. And it is caused, again, by direct contact. It would not be someone yelling at someone and then they run in front of a car. That would not be direct. There are different layers of how all of this pans out, and some of them are a little bit confusing, and in my opinion, some of them overlap quite frequently. So, physical harm, this is the first thing I will divulge to you. At age 8, I come from a home where I'm a twin, and my mom raised us by herself. and my sister and I were latchkey kids from about age 4. So we spent a great deal of time by ourselves, entertaining ourselves, taking care of ourselves, feeding ourselves, clothing ourselves, putting ourselves to bed, etc. At age 8, we lived in an apartment complex that had a lot of children that went to different school than we did. We kind of went to a lower income area school, and but these kids that lived in our apartment complex were kind of well-to-do, and they had a lot of things I wanted, a lot of things that I didn't have in my own home. And at age 8, I thought it would be really clever of me to figure out a way to get those things. And so there was a boy who I would see in my apartment complex, and he'd ride around on his bicycle every day after school. And I thought, that's a nice bike. That's a real nice bike. And one day he was riding by, and he had, now when I was a kid, the video games were not on a phone or anything like that. They were actual physical mini models of arcade games. So they were about this big, and they had very few games like Pac-Man, Frogger, things like that. So some of you may be familiar with those games. Well, this boy was riding his bike one day, and he had one of these game systems with a Frogger game. And I thought, that's a nice game. And I went out there and very politely asked him if I could play his game. And he called me a name, and I thought, I'm going to ask one more time. And I asked one more time, and he called me another name, and my reaction to that was to push him off his bike, steal his video game and his bike, and go home. So I did all of that without any thought of what my consequences would be. It was a reaction to something that had happened to me. I had no concern for what I had done to him or for anyone who would know. So I'm home for a few hours. You know, my mom's not home because she works. And so, you know, I hear this banging on our door, and I'm not answering it. I'm not supposed to answer the door. We're home alone. So I was following the rules. So a few hours later, after that, my mom came home, and she answered the door, and this very angry parent was yelling at my mom, saying, you know, your daughter did X, Y, and Z to my son. And I'm upstairs listening, because I know who's at the door. And my mom yells, Malachi, you know, get down there, you know, where's this bike? I don't have it. You know, it's on our patio. Clearly evident I don't own a bike. So it's out on the patio, and my mom had, you know, had to give it back, and she had to be humiliated because of something I did. So as a result of how I felt, I reacted, and it caused a ripple effect to that boy, his mom, my mom, and so on. I'm sure her friends heard about it, you know, I'm sure it went on and on. So that was my first experience. I bullied my sister. We bullied each other when we were little. You know, we did things like that, but we're siblings. It's a little bit of a different area. But this was my first experience interacting with someone who I really didn't know that well and who I basically was taking advantage of. So physical bullying, not very nice. Verbal bullying is a verbal assault on an intended target. So this could be including oral, so directly yelling at someone. It could also be written. It doesn't have to be, they don't have to hear it. They could see it. It could be, and they typically are direct threats. It's not, and name calling. It could also be graffiti on a wall that is displaying a message intended for a specific target. Verbal abuse relating to intelligence, age, race, sexual orientation, housing community, you name it, it covers, verbal bullying covers this area. And we'll get to statistics later about what kids see the most of and what is more prevalent in places. Relational bullying. Does anyone know what that is? Relational.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. So relational bullying is about relations. It is intended to harm someone's reputation or a relationship they may be in. So this is where gossip, rumor spreading, things like that come into play. And when we get into cyberbullying a little bit, and I will only touch on that briefly because I think it is covered a lot in different ways. But relational bullying would be, cyberbullying is under this area because it's intended to shame people, mostly with pictures or threatening messages, that type of thing. Relational bullying intentionally isolates the target. So it is the most harmful of all the bullying, on record at least. By report, it is the most harmful. Damage to property is probably one of the least visible to other people because it's underreported. So if someone took my iPod off my desk at school, I might know who did it because I've been a target, but I'm not going to tell on that person because it might make my targeting worse. So it goes unreported. The item disappears, I get in trouble at home, it's again a ripple effect of things that happen as a result of someone doing a bullying behavior. This area also covers, so stealing property or damaging property, things that are personal objects of the intended victim, intended target. So, some statistics. Teenagers, were interviewed in a discipline study at a school, and they were, I believe, 12 to 14 years old. It was like a 7th and 8th grade, maybe 7th, 8th, 9th. Middle school kind of changes from state to state. So age-wise, I think it's 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. And in that study, kids identified that they witnessed at school, and this is collectively, each of them were saying this, 50 incidents per week of some sort of bullying. That's a lot. That number seems really high to me. They reported that, this is my dog, by the way, so that's why he's kind of, he's a little needy. But verbal abuse was the most common, verbal bullying, verbal assault, the most common type of bullying reported. And it's probably, I like to call it sub-reported. They might report it to a staff who they feel safe with, but maybe a staff that they know isn't going to take it further up the chain. So they feel, oh, I've told someone that someone's name calling to me, but I know it's not going to get back to the person who's doing the name calling, so I'll be okay. But at least when my mom says, did you let someone know, I can say yes and not be a liar. So physical bullying was the least common at school campuses, which again I find interesting because in my day and age it was probably the most common type of bullying. There were fights in the parking lot, fights in the hallway, fights in the bathroom, all over. And then they reported that the relational bullying was the most harmful. That's a very prime age for developing relationships, 12 to 14. If I'm a 12-year-old and someone is telling me that I'm fat or I'm ugly or I need to go back to my country or whatever that is, I'm going to believe them. I'm impressionable at that age, and I don't really have a lot of skills to retaliate initially, but what I will do is I'll sit in it, I'll hear it day after day, and eventually I will have had enough. And then it becomes a whole different type. Then the person who's bullied becomes the person who bullies as a result of they don't know what else to do with all of that that's going on. This is kind of where our mental health system comes into play, and where parents come into play and other educators or people who are around scenarios where there is bullying. Also, the most bullying statistics are from school zones. So most of the bullying that people talk about occurs in schools. I would say that the statistics would say probably 80% of it on school playgrounds. The rest of it is a little more covert. So, challenges. What are the challenges of bullying, of identifying bullying? How many of you work in the school system? Anybody? So do you all work in the mental health system? Okay. Raise your hand if you've dealt with bullying in some way or another. Okay. So the first challenge, and I got a lot of this statistical information from stopbullying.gov, which is a great website. They have a ton of information that's helpful in schools or in situations where there are groups of kids that there's potential for bullying. In order to define bullying, which is the unwanted aggressive behavior, you have to determine if there is a real threat. Is someone just calling someone a name, it's a one-time incident? Or is it something that this child has received repeatedly, day after day, month after month? And then finally he's able to say something. So I say this to say that a lot of parents will hear their child come home and say, I was picked on at school today. Or, so-and-so called me a name, and it's really hot up here, or so-and-so called me a name. And what ends up happening is that the parent or parents don't think it's a big deal. It's just one time. That's just kids being kids. Oh, I had to go through that when I was in school. It's a rite of passage. All of those things are not true. Bullying is not atypical behavior. It is common, but every child doesn't do it. And every child is not an intended target of a bully either, of someone who bullies. They ask questions if someone is reporting having been bullied. Are you friends with this person? What is your relationship with this person? Are they a stranger? Are you sure they were talking to you? When you hear these questions, imagine that you're a teenager. What do you hear really? Is there, when I hear these questions, what I think of is they totally don't believe me. They're trying to rationalize that calling me a name is okay. And these are the adults in my world. And so it's very tricky when kids come to you and express things like that you are aware and ask these questions, but in a way that they know they're being supported, in a way that you're not questioning their reality. You're not saying, I don't believe you. You're saying, I'm trying to get more information so I can help you. So there's a different direction that you can take those questions where they'll believe that you are actually trying to help. Because one of the most damaging things we can do as adults is when kids do come to us with this stuff is ignore it. It just perpetuates the cycle. And power imbalance is one of another challenge. Power imbalance really is one of the main reasons that kids who have bullying behavior choose to do that. Power imbalance, so if I'm going to talk about some films that have this, so I'm trying not to jump to that right now. If there's a group of kids at school and they're very popular or perceived as popular, and they want something done, so they're going to go to someone who they perceive as less popular and kind of command them to do this action, whatever it might be. And so that displays a power imbalance. If there is a power imbalance, there is a high chance that there is bullying behavior going on. If they are asking, they're not friends, they're not in the same social circles, they're asking them to complete an activity, or to, maybe it's give me answers to a test. Or maybe it's, hey, see that soda pop over there? I want it. But I'm not quick enough to get it. So maybe if I distract the teacher, you could get it for me. That type of thing is power imbalance. It's using and abusing someone's sense of power. And it might only be perceived power because teenagers are not technically powerful, right, or authority figures in a school setting, but there is that power structure. There is a pecking order at all schools. And so it's it's one of those main important things to watch out for. If you're in an environment and there are adolescents who are being bullied in this manner, it's something that you can ask them. Are you friends with that person? It's, again, questioning and checking in. When I get to the statistics toward the end, I think that you guys might be baffled at how many incidents at a school campus are not addressed. And all of this information that I'm saying to you is so that you can be more aware and maybe pass it on to people. Maybe you know people who work in the education system. Most of the reports I read were all about statistics, literally. This many kids report bullying. This many kids have been bullied. This many kids are people who bully. There wasn't a lot of personalized information that humanizes the problem. Because when things become statistical, I don't know if you guys are like me, but I'm like, I don't want to read that. That's a lot of numbers, a lot of information. What I want to know is how I can help. How can I prevent that from continuing? So those are some of the challenges, is that we really need to ask more questions, have our eyes a little more open, and just pay more attention. One of the main challenges with trying to figure out if the behavior is bullying or if it isn't is in the area of cyberbullying. So cyberbullying is a little bit different. It is not, it's indirect, right? Typically, sometimes you know who's doing it because it might come through a cell phone. It might come through a Facebook page with a name attached to it, but a lot of cyberbullying is done anonymously. And so how do people determine if there's a power imbalance when they don't know who it is? How do they determine if there is a repetition, if there are things out in the world like Snapchat, which disappear like that? How do you know your child hasn't received 100 messages in the last hour from someone? Because all you see is 5 seconds of one. So it gets very tricky. Technology makes bullying a little more accessible to people who wouldn't typically bully other kids. Children are less likely, these statistics are I wrote interesting because it says children and youth are less likely to experience cyberbullying than many other types of bullying. Though I have read most recently, it's the most common form of bullying in the media, is what cyberbullying does to other people, how it creates kind of chaos in everybody's world. But typically, the reason that statistic is that when most bullying happens, like I said, at a school campus, which has very set standard hours, but cyberbullying is 24/7. And so that's where those numbers come into play, is that it is very common, but it's not observed as often as other bullying because it's typically on a teenager's computer screen or a teenager's phone, and you don't have typically direct access to that. So now I get to play a little game with you guys, and you get to say whether or not this is bullying behavior, because there's a few scenarios. So I'm going to read the scenario, and then when you know if it's bullying or not bullying, you can shout it out. Okay, Angie, usually a friendly, engaged student in the classroom, has started sitting in the back of the room and no longer gets involved much in class discussions. One day you observe that as she's leaving class, 2 other students walking out of class right behind her are whispering to each other and giggling. So bullying or not bullying? Right, need more information. But it would raise concern. Those would be one of those times where you could ask questions. Hey, I noticed those girls were giggling. Do you know them? Could you hear them? The more information you have, the more you can identify. Okay, scenario number 2. Your class is brainstorming a list of topics for a writing project. As the students begin to talk about favorite hobbies as possible writing topics, Benny, a child with autism and ADHD, blurts out loudly that he wants to write about his dance class. Some of the other boys laugh. The next day, Benny comes to school wearing jeans and a dance leotard. You overhear one of the boys say, "Those are girls' clothes." Bullying or not bullying?
That's bullying. Shaming.
It would appear that it would be bullying, but because it is not a repeated pattern, at least in this scenario, you need more information before you can identify. It would raise concern, and it would open a doorway to talk to both the boy about maybe what's appropriate clothing for school versus the kids about, we don't talk about how other people dress, it's not appropriate. People should be able to express themselves however they want to express themselves as far as clothing goes. So the actual answer is not bullying because it is not repetitive. Scenario number 3. During most of the semester, Steve was part of what had seemed to be a pretty tight group of students who often would sit together in class and volunteer to work as a team on class projects. For the last few weeks, when Steve would sit with the group, they would ignore him, acting as if he wasn't there. Steve has now started sitting on the other side of the room. Steve's mom calls to express concern that her son is becoming increasingly withdrawn at home and talks about wanting to change schools. The previous evening, she walked into Steve's room and had found a horrible message addressed to him on his Facebook page that he had left open. I like how they put that in like she wasn't crying. She's a mom, she should be crying. So she sees this message, and she has called because the messages were from the same group of students who he used to sit with in class. When she confronted her son about the message, he broke down and said that the messages have appeared every night for the past few weeks. Bullying or not bullying?
Bullying.
Why? It's repetitive, exactly. And because they were intentionally isolating him, shutting him out, which is relational bullying, very harmful. Okay. Scenario number 4. Today is the day that your students are presenting their posters at the conclusion of their genealogy projects. All students are supposed to stand up and talk about their families and what they put on their posters. When Rita talks about her dad's, someone in the back of the room yells, "That's weird." Bullying or not bullying? Not bullying. Why? Would it cause concern? So it's one of those.
It's also the context. You don't know what she was talking about. Maybe she was saying something that was weird
Right.
about her father, and she was.
You need more information.
That's what
So-
just a comment, but.
Right, yes.
So is it repetitive in the sense that the person who's making the comments repeats the same behavior on different kids, or
The same.
the same child, the
Yes.
target?
Wouldn't it be intent too? I mean,
Yes.
intent also.
Yes, I mean, I call them throughout this intended targets because it's very possible I could yell profanity across the campus and it might, 6 people might hear it, but I meant for, Jennifer to hear it. So,
Intent to harm.
intent
That's
to,
like
yeah,
context, I think is so.
there is no one named Jennifer in here right now. I don't really mean anyone here. Okay, so yes, not bullying is the answer. So the last one is, Kathy is a bright student who has done well in your class for the first half of the year. Although she is an attractive young woman, she also is considerably overweight to the point of being obese. You have been impressed by the way her kindness and bubbly personality have made her a very popular student. In a unit on the early American West, Kathy presents a fine oral report on the role of women in settling the Western frontier. She gets an A on her report, but from that point, you begin seeing a marked change in her personality. She becomes increasingly withdrawn in class, and her academic work is barely passing. Concerned about the change you are seeing, you ask to meet with her after school. When you express your concern, Kathy explodes into anger, lashing out at this stupid school, and storms out of your classroom. A piece of paper falls from her book bag as she is leaving. You pick it up and find out it is a crudely drawn picture of an overweight woman in a cowgirl outfit. Written across the top are only the words, "Kathy the Cowgirl." After further investigation, you find that these pictures have been appearing in the girls' bathroom and the locker room, as well as on the internet. Some of them simply read, "Kathy the Cow." Bullying or not bullying? Yes. Why?
Body shaming.
Yes. They were designed to harm her, all of it. Very good, you guys did well. I don't have prizes, but you were awesome. Okay. This is the part where I could tell you, so you heard about me being the person who bullies. And just so you guys know and don't have any unresolved questions, it happened one time. I did not continue to abuse this poor boy, so it probably wasn't technically, in today's terms, considered bullying. It was probably just considered bratty. But yes, exactly. that might be true. Getting what I want by other means. At age 15, I was in high school, and I had moved here to San Diego, and I was in a performing arts high. There were a lot of really nice kids, and then there were a lot of really not nice kids. And just so you all know, part of my story, it's probably relative to this topic, is that I'm gay. I've known for a very long time, and I was not shy about letting people know. I didn't wear clothes that said, "Hey, I am." But if someone asked me, or if someone asked me out on a date, I would tell them, "You're not really my type," and things like that. So in high school, I was very best friends with this boy, and his girlfriend hated me. Hated me. I mean, bullied me beyond belief. She would call me names to my face behind my back. She would corner me in the hallway and make threats to me. She would, constantly say things out loud in front of other people. You know, "That girl's an expletive. I'm going to kick her expletive." And I was baffled because I had never done anything to this girl, ever. Come to find out, this boy that I was very close friends with, we had every class together, we automatically became great friends, was her boyfriend, and she felt threatened by me that I was moving in on her territory. So part of me thought, I should just tell her. She could kind of relax and know that he's not my type. And part of me thought, it's kind of funny to see her squirm like that, because I'm not going to do anything, you know? And she would make those threats, but she was never physically, she never pushed me or anything like that. So I really wasn't afraid of her. And, you know, I've been about this size since I was in high school. I'm not a very big person, but I'm strong, kind of freakishly strong. I skated roller derby. You probably don't want to mess with me. And in school, those kids didn't know that, right? I'm this young girl, you know, I'm in theater. That's what I did at the school. And so I'm kind of in their mind a theater person. So this girl, I'm thinking, she doesn't even know me at all. What she knows is that I sit next to her boyfriend every day in every class, and it makes her very angry. So she lashes out at me. This was probably my very first encounter with recognizing there's a reason she does what she does. It's not just someone who is lashing out at other people for no reason or for sport, which is really what this presentation is about. I think that there are means behind the mean. There are reasons kids do what they do. And in this case, one day, our photography class that I was in with her boyfriend, and an art class or something that she was in, combined and went on a field trip. And we went on an actual field trip. We drove from San Diego to LA and went to a movie studio, and we got to see the filming of a show. And on our way, it's like a 3-hour drive in a bus, 4 hours maybe in those big buses. And on our way, about halfway there, our bus broke down. And so we're all on this bus together, and this girl's giving me dirty looks across the bus, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm totally in this space, and I can't get away from her, and she's humiliating me in front of other people. Because what my insides say is, I have to protect myself. I need to physically lash out at her to make her see, you know. But really, I didn't want to do that because I don't want to be that person. I didn't want to turn into the person she was. And so as our bus broke down, we were asked, all of us, to get off this bus. And one of my drama classmates had brought this game called Scruples. I don't know how many of you know it, but it's a card game, and you look at the card and you ask questions, and then people go around and kind of answer the questions. And there was a question, and we were all kind of sitting in a group, and she was in that group and I was in that group, and this question came up about childhood or about like our home life. And we answered it pretty similarly. And you know, the day went on, and I didn't even think anything of it. The day went on, and we got to the movie studio and did our thing. And then we're on the bus on the way back home, and I'm hanging out in the seat by myself because everybody knows she's mad at me and, you know, targeting me. And she comes over and sits down next to me. And I'm thinking, oh my God, she's right here, I'm right here. I'm like against the window in the bus seat. What's going to happen? Can the bus driver see me? You know, am I going to have to get physical and get arrested? What's going to happen? I had no idea. So she sits down next to me, and very calmly she says to me, sounds like you and I have similar childhoods. And I was like, yeah, it does sound like that. Still thinking, what is she going to do? What's going to happen right now? And she said, I probably should have thought of that. I mean, we're 14, 15 years old. And we're at that point, beginning of our junior year. We both had birthdays, so we graduated at 17. So we're at the beginning of our junior year. And so she says, yeah, I probably should have thought about that. We sat there and talked. We just talked back and forth, and I thought that's the end of it, right? I thought, okay, well, we have peace now, it's fine. She has been my best friend for 28 years.
Oh my God.
I mean, so good things come of when you address a situation, but that never would have happened had I reacted, and then she would have reacted, and it would have just continued to perpetuate the bully type behavior.
I think a lot of, I think there's two problems that's hard for like clinicians or even just teachers to understand, or even the kids themselves understand. Is one, that we usually seek out people who have some sort of quality that we don't like about ourselves that makes us uncomfortable. And so just educating the child on that. And then the other thing is that I've noticed is that the perpetrator has always at some point been a victim themselves of something, and it's so hard to see that all the way from, you know, bullying to a child molester.
Yes.
It's that they at some point been the victim, and it's so hard to see them as that once they become the aggressive perp. Like,
Yes.
it's so hard to see them that way.
It is very hard to see, and that's a fantastic segue into the last part of my presentation, is that we've talked about statistics about kids, we've talked about facts, we've talked about, we will be talking about myths. There are some myths. But so the risk factors of bullying. And in my mind, these came from a site of kids who are being bullied, but in my mind, when I read these, it crosses over. Absolutely. So you have the individual. I know I don't have a fancy PowerPoint, but I will draw it as eloquently as possible with words. The family is up here, the school is here, peers are here, and the community is below. So you're surrounded, if you can visualize it, the individual is surrounded by elements that can cause or enhance the behaviors. So it's very complex, the interactions between community and, you know, hey, where do you live? Where are you from? I was a staff member, the school that they talked about, my very first school I worked at in LA, I worked in Canoga Park, and it's a pretty gang-affiliated area. And it was very different back then. It was the 90s, and these kids were, it wasn't residential, and they were older. They were kids who kind of failed out of school, and they were at this private school. And so they actually allowed these kids to smoke in the morning before school, but they always had to have a staff presence. So frequently I was the staff outside monitoring them. And this carload full of kids pulled up one day, and because I'm smaller, they're talking to me like I'm a kid at this school. And they say, where are you from? And I was like, Earth? Where? I wasn't getting it. I'm like, I'm from Earth, where are you from? Anyway, it's those types of things that cause behavior. Where are you from? Are you from the wrong side of the tracks, or are you from the right side of the tracks? That's going to determine whether I like you or I can talk to you or not. Because my friends don't think you're cool, I don't think you're cool, right? I'm not an individual, I'm a pack mentality when I'm a teenager. So, family, what's your family look like? Are you a single parent home? Do you have 2 moms? Do you have 2 dads? Do you have a divorced family? Is there going to be a dad home when I try to come and beat you up in your front yard? Those are the things that go on. People ask about your family, your school. What school do you go to? Do you go to an honors program? Or do you go to the school, on the other side of the tracks? With all the potheads or the, gangsters or whatever it is. There are always labels, always, always, always. This is one of the things that if we could stop that, I think it might really help stopping the bullying. Because once kids kind of see themselves as the same, things will shift. It's going to be a long time from now. That will take a lot of work and a lot of effort. Individual temperament of kids plays a role. Am I hot-headed? Am I going to react if someone calls me a name, or am I going to blow it off? And then maybe react if it happens 6 times. I don't know. Am I smart? Do I perceive myself as smart? Or do I think I'm an idiot compared to the 6 kids in my class who are in AP courses, and I'm not? And they don't know. It might be, I don't have time for that because I have 2 jobs after school to support my 2-year-old, at 15. Whatever the case may be, you don't know. And so it is involved in bullying to get the information. Do I use alcohol? Do I use drugs? If I do, are my perceptions off? Did I hear something wrong? Was I moving real slow and I missed the point of that comment someone made to me? Do I have a disability? Are people going to, again, these cross over. Do I have a disability? Am I going to be a target because I have a limp? Or because I wear really thick glasses, or maybe braces? Or do I have a learning disability and I'm in a special class at school? So people think that I'm different and therefore I'm immediately a target. Or am I different? And if I'm different, am I lashing out at other people because I don't know how to handle being different? So now I've become the person who bullies because I have a learning disability and I'm not the same as my peers. I'm not in that classroom. I didn't make the football team. I wasn't fast enough. I'm not good enough. Have I identified my sexual orientation? A lot of kids don't by that age, but kids like me did. It makes me different. It makes me feel separate. It makes me feel less than. Am I setting myself up by, should I feel comfortable sharing that with my friends? Or am I in fear that they're going to take that information and then I will be a target? Because right now I'm laying low. Nobody knows. I'm under the radar. They may every once in a while see me walk into the LGBT club of after school, or the alliance, gay straight alliance a lot of schools have. But if they ask, no, I'm in the alliance. I'm just here to support. Because I'm terrified of what I've seen around me. Children who are involved in drugs, alcohol, abuse, single parent homes, they are more frequently involved in bullying type behavior. has to do with fitting in, social acceptance. A lot of it has to do with, I didn't have a lot of role models to tell me that that was not okay. This is how I survived before I came to this school. So, let's see. Do you have any questions yet? Anyone? While I get to my movie section. Okay, the myths. Myths about bullying. This is fun again. Myths about people who bully. So all people who bully are loners and have no friends. So I should not say it's a myth. True or false? It is false. Why? Why would it be false?
Have mentality of people see you as powerful, and you must be cool, and I'm scared, so I'll follow you.
Right. And there are all different types of people. So it's really a generalization to say that all people do that. And the flip side of that is not all loners are people who bully. Sometimes they're just people who don't like other people, and they just want to be by themselves. Okay, true or false? People who bully struggle with self-esteem.
Not all the time. I would say
The-
that's true.
Right. It actually, I agree with you that I think that there are some people who bully that do have self-esteem issues. However, it's a myth that all people. So most people think that when they're characterizing people who bully, that it kind of covers the whole gamut. There are people who bully. Just like if someone were to say to me, oh, gay people do this, or white people do this, or people with pink hair do this, or, so it's a generalization. So some people who bully have self-esteem issues, but as a whole, most people who are bullying don't do that because they have low self-esteem. They do it for other reasons, or maybe they don't have identified low self-esteem. So they don't do it because they feel bad about themselves, they do it because they feel driven to do it, to do several things, and I'll give you some examples in a few minutes when we talk about some films. They realize that when they bully, they get attention. And a lot of people who do bullying behavior do it for that notoriety. True or false? Bullying isn't a big deal. It's just kids being kids. False. Bullying does not build character. It breaks people down. It shapes people. It makes people who might be vulnerable more vulnerable. Even the person who bullies can become more vulnerable by doing that behavior. It's not a normal part of growing up. It is not a rite of passage like I talked about earlier. It is a huge deal, and it is a huge problem more recently. True or false? Bullying does not happen at all schools. It's false. Bullying occurs everywhere. The statistics of school bullying, which I looked up, over 77% of students have been bullied. That's a huge number of kids. 160,000 students miss school because of incidents of being bullied. Every 7 minutes on a school campus, a child is bullied. 4% of the time, there is adult intervention when that occurs. 11% of the time, there's peer intervention. And 85% of the time, there is no intervention. When I was reading this, I was like, that's a lot. Is that a lot?
That's a lot.
That's a lot of times of someone turning the other way. And I don't know if, because the reports don't show that, is it people who don't know how to identify it, or is it people who don't care? People who have too much work to do, so they're too busy to do that, or kids who don't report it because they're terrified. It's probably a little of all of it. And I think that needs to change. I think that there are school laws now. Schools that are state funded are required to have bullying prevention programs. So, but not all schools are state funded, so I don't really know what their requirements are. And it would behoove all schools or areas where there are groups of kids clubs or park programs to have these policies in place. The last myth that I have is people who bully are easy to spot. So if I walked in here and I didn't tell you the story about pushing the boy off the bike, would you think I was a bully? That's just because you know me. But maybe not in this outfit, but if you saw me outside of work and you saw me walk up and I have tattoos and I might have motorcycle boots on, you know, walking with a German Shepherd, would you think I'm a bully? So physically, a lot of people assume that people who look different or kind of a little more edgy or hard or whatever it is, if they wear a bandana or whatever, that they're an instant gang member, when really maybe they just want to wear a bandana, maybe their hair's a mess that day. Contrary to popular belief, I do not have tattoos because I'm a bully or someone who bullies. I'm creative and artistic, and that's how I like to express it. It is the truth about a lot of people. I get followed around in stores when I go into stores. In my early high school, I was very, I don't know what you would characterize it now, mod or punk rock or whatever. I wore a lot of black, a lot. I had big combat boots, and every place I went, there were eyes on me, and not the good kind. Not like, oh, she's cool, I'd like to get to know her. Like, ooh, what's she gonna take? You know? And so physical appearance plays a big part in what people think. And so you might think that you're spotting a bully, and really it could be the girl who sits next to me, who has the perfect hair and you know, the perfect dress every day, and she's so sweet, and the teachers call on her all the time because she's so smart. She's the one to look out for. Seriously. So the biggest thing about kids who bully is that they can be anybody. It can absolutely be anybody. There's statistics that show that kids who bully, who are not really identifiable by, like they wouldn't walk into a room and someone would think they were bullied. There are statistics that show that those kids are so covert in their bullying behaviors that they could do it right in front of a staff member and the staff member has no idea. In this field, we call it manipulation. It happens all the time. I'm in a class with a peer, and these peers know from being in this class with me that I'm super shy, and I don't like to answer out loud because maybe I have a stutter. And so there's a sub in the class that day, and the girl behind me, who I perceive as a bully, who constantly throughout the year has tortured me with notes and whatnot, raises her hand when the teacher asks a question and says, oh, Malachi will answer it. She always answers it. And the sub, who has no idea that they've never been in the room, they might think it's true, will say, oh, okay, Malachi, answer it. Now I'm on the spot. I'm terrified because I know now I'm even more nervous and I will stutter. And everyone's going to laugh. And after I leave that room, it will continue. And so this girl has set me up intentionally to shame me and to isolate me from my peers. She is the most dangerous kind of bully. Person who bullies. I'm trying not to call them that because it is kind of like a tag, like a label, and I don't think that that's okay. So these kids know they are intentionally harming someone. And they get away with it day after day. Because did what she do to any of you, if you didn't know, look like bullying? It looked like maybe she was being helpful to the teacher. You know, in my world, it does not look like bullying. So we've talked a little bit about what we know about people who are bullied. What about the actual people who bully? So these kids, like we talked about, are maybe drug and alcohol is present in their home. Maybe abuse is present in their home. Maybe watch movies? Okay, so in this day of media, you know, everyone watches the computer or plays things on the computers, but people our age who grew up without all the technology watched movies, right? So there were a lot of movies that I started, when they asked me to do this and I picked this topic, I started thinking, how often am I faced with watching that? How often really is it present in my everyday life? So then I think about, and I probably shouldn't go by the series that I watch, because I like to watch things like crime stuff and what's the motorcycle one? Sons of Anarchy. Like there's a lot of bullying going on in that movie, in that show. But in real cinema, what I started thinking about, like how far back could I think of movies that I had seen? So my favorite like era is the 80s. I love 80s movies, I love 80s clothing, I love 80s music, and I thought I'm going to look at some of those. So I pulled up movies, late 80s, early 90s for film, John Hughes films. So what I pulled up, the first one I looked up was Heathers. How many of you have seen Heathers? Okay, so you know that that movie is about people who bully. But at first glance, that isn't what that movie is about. At first glance, that movie is about a group of girls who are good friends and everybody just hates them because they're popular. But then you start to see the behaviors come out. And then you kind of get sub-characters coming in. So my favorite character is JD, right? So he's the friend of Veronica, the girl who's going to take down the Heathers. And so JD, you find out, he's kind of instigating her. It's pack mentality. He's instigating her, yeah, we could do this. So for those of you who have seen the movie, you remember, or maybe you don't, might have been a long time, but Veronica accidentally poisons one of the Heathers and she dies. The court system, paper system, whatever, rules it suicide. So she feels like she got away with it. JD thinks, oh, that's a great idea, we have a couple more Heathers to go. So they're plotting murder because they think they can. So what you find out later in the film is that he has tons of mental instability. He has mental illness. He is the driving force behind all of this. So point one, mental illness is present. Then you come to Mean Girls, which is like the newer version of the Heathers. And you see that these girls have that social power. They have that desire to be on top no matter what. And they do really hateful things to a lot of people because it makes them feel good. But then there's a scene where you go to the house of the lead girl and you see her mom. And you see that not only is she pretty much an alcoholic, identified, but she's had tons of plastic surgery, and she talks to her daughter like her daughter's the parent. She first talks to her like she's her best friend, but then you see that she has parentified her daughter. This girl has no role models, no structure, really. She talks in that scene about how, oh my God, this is your room. It's like the size of this room. And she says, yeah, I made my parents give it to me. I don't doubt that. I believe it. She has been brought up to think she's in charge, and therefore she is, at home and at school. So a lot of things happen in that film too, and it doesn't turn out so well. But again, so you have these things that are mental, they're things that could have been helped by therapy, family therapy. If she were able to tell someone, the reason why I'm really mean to you is because my mom is not around, and when she is around, she's annoying me because she wants to be me. The Breakfast Club. So that one is full of bullying and abuse and reasons behind it. So you have the jock character, and there's a great scene where he's talking about his dad and why he did what he did. So he got the detention because he taped someone's butt together in the gymnasium. And he's telling these kids, I did it because I wanted my dad to be proud of me. Because he never says it. He's not around. He doesn't look at me like I'm a good son. And then you have the guy who is kind of personifies what people think a bully is, or what a person who bullies looks like. You know, he's got the torn flannel shirt and the leather gloves and the torn jeans, and he's got a bad attitude. Well, so this kid, you find out, right, is physically abused at home. he's punched, he's burned. These are all things that if we as the grown-ups in that environment could identify, these kids probably, A, might not have even been in detention, but 2, might not have the type of behavior that they have. Early onset help is what needs to happen. We need more of that. Hearts in Atlantis is probably a movie many of you haven't seen, but maybe some of you have. It was in the early 2000s, a film about a young boy who was a cross-dresser, but no one knew it. And he bullied tons of people. He had 2 particular targets, littler kids that he would bully. But he, a grown-up came into town who used to live in this town who kind of sees everything. He's kind of a psychic of sorts, and he knows this boy's secret. And he starts intervening every time he picks on these kids. Every time he shows up and he is pushing them off their bikes or punching them, he shows up and he tells this boy, you don't want to do this. I know your secret and I know why you're doing this and you don't want to do it. And through that communication, that interaction, he starts to feel comfortable to share this information and starts to uncover why he has become the angry, abusive person that he has become, when really he isn't that person at all. He's someone who's terrified of being himself. So all the films I just talked about are kind of myth related. These kids have, some of them have self-esteem, some of them don't. Some of them learn to get the self-esteem through the behavior that they do. Some of them indicated social power, climbing that social ladder, how important that is in high school. The one great, it's probably a terribly inappropriate movie, but Dazed and Confused, I'm sure you all have seen it at some point. There's a scene where they're hazing the kids. So these kids leave middle school and they're going into high school, and they have all the girls lined up on this playground, and they're spraying them, they're calling them horrible names, and they're squirting condiments on them, and calling them, just horrible names, and making them suck pacifiers, all humiliating things they're having them do. And in that time period in the 1970s, it was a rite of passage. Those types of things were looked at as okay. It wasn't until later when people started getting hurt or hazing incidences at colleges would get notified because someone would get seriously hurt or even killed as a result of that, that they started looking at this type of behavior as bullying type behavior. So they aren't kids just being kids. It isn't a rite of passage. It is something that is needs to go away in schools. It's not the norm. I think I've pretty much covered and I see the time, I know you guys have to go. The bulk of what I wanted to say today is that there are new statistics coming out that are correlated to mental health concerns being an identifier in kids who bully others. And the reason it hasn't come out sooner, I think, is there's difficulty in looking at a kid who has anxiety or a kid who has depression and thinking that they are capable of bullying somebody. Those kids have internalized disorders, right? If they lash out, it's typically at themselves. And but what has happened is they have found that they get to that limit of, I don't want to feel like this anymore and I need to do something different. And they start seeing kids around them doing this behavior and getting friends and feeling calm or appearing calm. You know, everything has a backstory. But they start seeing this behavior and they want to emulate it because, again, adolescence, pack mentality. So we need to start educating to go the other way. We need to educate kids it's okay to have a mental illness. There is help out there for it. You don't have to go the route of taking your anxiety or fear out on other people. They found that kids with ADHD are highly likely to be bullying, to kids who bully, because they are impulsive. So if they hear, it doesn't even have to be more than 2 times. If they hear someone call them a name, they're done. They don't have that impulse control. So they lash out. Again, it's their mental health concerns that can be addressed and teach them coping skills so that they don't have to have that behavior. My hope is that there will be less focus kids who are bullied are very important. I think that there is a lot of focus currently on kids who are bullied and not enough focus on kids who bully. I think that if more of the focus was on the kids who bully, there would be less population of kids who are bullied. So that is the gist of my presentation today. Thank you all for attending, and